going live. Okay, and it says we're live, so there we go. I mean, we can still wait, but this will just be we'll start at 12:30.
Okay.
From Wanda, it says okay, let me text Wanda and see if we're live. Are we live? ? I did a 30-second delay, so we're 30 seconds behind. So, I mean, they are. So, and I just told
we're
them
30
that.
seconds in the future right now.
Wow, think about that.
Yeah. Impactful.
I'm actually, I've got that up as well, so I can see the chat bar.
Oh, good. Okay, cool. If somebody
going live. Okay, yep, we're live. So going live. Let me mute that. Okay, how do I mute this?
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. I muted it, so we're good there.
Okay,
all right. So we're technically live now. So what time is it? Okay, it's 12:28. We can go and get started. Let's do that since people are waiting.
Okay.
All right. Well, welcome, guys. Anyone who's joining us for this summer reading book club, very last minute thing that we threw together. So, yeah, this is exciting. We just figured, hey, it's summer. Don't really have anything going on at the church. And so why not maybe try and read a book together? And just so you know, this is not my idea. We totally took this from another church. So we're not brilliant and creative. We did choose a different book from them, but I just thought this would be a really cool way to engage people in thoughtful discussion around a really good book. So we chose Confronting Christianity, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. But before we do that, I'd like just to introduce who's on the screen real quick. So I'll start. My name's Hunter Braden. I'm the discipleship minister here at Crosspoint, and I help oversee groups and classes.
Now me?
Yeah.
Ladies first. Ladies first.
Thank you. I'm Amy Clackham. I'm the discipleship director here at Crosspoint.
Cool. And then I'm Lane Vrooman. I work as the Cartersville campus pastor, work with deacons, help oversee pastoral care and stuff like that. So excited to be a part of this conversation and read this book together. So
cool. All right. So like I said, we chose this book called Confronting Christianity, which has a red sleeve cover, but also looks really cool with it off. So anyways, yeah, I figured I'd draw attention to that because it looks great. But and basically this book, the way that it's broken out is it takes 12 really hard questions that are posed at Christianity. And so each chapter is a different question. So what we figured we'd do is just take a chapter each week, talk through the question, talk through the chapter, what our thoughts were. Again, we're only going to be on here for about 30 minutes and then we'll be done. So close to 1, I'll be done. If you're joining us, there's a little chat feature on YouTube. I would love to hear your thoughts, your questions. And so I can see that chat. So feel free to type in there, you know, if it's a quote from something that stood out to you, or I don't know, just we'd love for you to be a part of the conversation as well. So every now and then I'll go back and check the chat. And then at the very end, we'll save maybe 5 minutes or so, and we'll look through if you guys have any questions that you'd like for us to discuss. So with all that said, we'll go ahead and get started. So I don't know about you guys, but I did read the introduction. I did just read chapter 1, but the introduction is like 3 pages. So I read that too. And so what I'd like to do is just kind of talk about, Amy, I know you read it as well. We can talk about the intro real quick because I feel like it sets up the book really well. So in the introduction, she talks about this secular hypothesis is what I think she calls it. Yeah, the secularization hypothesis, which is a mouthful. But basically talking about this idea that as the world continues to grow civilized, educated, and even Western, that it's going to increasingly become more and more secular. You know, that's what we thought with America as well, because, we're the second Europe, right? So Europe is like 10 years ahead of us. So whatever happens there is what's going to happen here. That was kind of the big hypothesis. Oh my gosh. Guys, I think
look at here, a special guest.
And just so you guys know, we have a special guest with us this evening or afternoon. I don't know if he's actually going to turn his video on. Okay, well, I'll get back to this thought, and then Matt, if you jump on, we'll introduce you. But so there's this hypothesis that, again, this world's going to increasingly grow more secular. But what she actually shows us in the introduction is that that's not true. That sociologists are actually predicting a more religious world in 40 years from now, which I just thought was shocking, because I'll be honest, that was what I thought. I thought that, as the world does become more civilized and educated, that it's going to lean more modernistic and secular and evolution. Like, even when we look in our school systems, like I think we see that. And so what she poses is that the question is not is religion going to die out, but she ends the introduction by saying the real question is it going to be Christianity or Islam? Because those are the two fastest growing world religions right now. And so before we keep going, I want to introduce the new guy on the screen, Mr. Matt Moody.
All right, dude.
Dude, thank you for joining us.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Zoom was giving me some hiccups, but thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So Matt, real quick, just introduce yourself, what you do, and then that's it.
Yeah. Matt Moody, and I'm the executive pastor here, and I'm excited to be reading this book with you guys.
Sweet. Okay. Well, we're just talking about the introduction, where I was saying how she kind of sets up this, she kind of tears down actually the secular hypothesis that the world's going to get increasingly more irreligious. And she's saying, actually, that's not true. What we're seeing statistically, demographically, is that the world is actually is increasingly a religious world. So anyways, I wasn't sure if you guys had any thoughts or things that stood out to you in the intro.
Well, I think something that kind of stood out to me was just that it's a good and important reminder, and one that I kind of relished in reading this, is that the church is the bride of Christ. And so even when everything in the world is messed up and fractured and just seems like nothing but chaos, we should not be surprised that God's going to sustain his church, right? He's going to sustain his bride. And so it's just interesting to see, even in the first century church, and you read it like in First Thessalonians, Second Thessalonians, how people thought it was the end of the world and that all of it, but really, right. Tracing through time, persecution and just, let's say the culture at large being sinful and broken is par for the course. It's like, why should we even be surprised? But it's cool to see how God has provided and sustained since the church has been institutionalized. So I thought that was pretty powerful.
Yeah.
I like the reminder of the world. Like, I think so often America, like our narrowed setting, and yet God is moving in ways, in places that we don't see on a daily basis. And it's such a beautiful reminder that there's so much more going on. And as the world gets smaller through technology and growth, how that's really providing an opportunity for the gospel in places that's never been before. And so to see that growth, just an incredible reminder to me of both our role, but also God's faithfulness.
Yeah. And go ahead, Hunter.
I was just saying, Moody, we talked about that the other day, about how what I find so refreshing about this book is she's giving me a perspective that I just always forget. I'm thinking, in my very Western Georgia white kind of, like, I'm just thinking about our context, and, I think about, Christianity's dying and blah, blah, blah. But, she seems to back up and go, whoa, wait. But like, there's the rest of the world that you have to take in consideration here. Like, it's exploding in other parts of the world that, we don't even think about, because we think it's dying. When the truth is the rest of the world is exploding.
Yeah, that's right. Hunter was getting on to me for reading ahead into chapter 2, which is where the discussion began. So
yeah.
Next week, we'll get even more into that, which is great.
That's awesome.
Well,
I was just going to
earlier.
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback on what Amy was saying. Is just it's crazy to see that conservative estimates from 2010 put China's Christian population at over 68 million. representing about 5% of their population. And you think about the church in a place like China, holy cow. I mean, you can't, you talk about, whatever, oppression and persecution there, to identify as a Christian and to even meet as the church is dangerous. And so just to see how that provides thriving, environments for the gospel to spread, because there's that hope in it, that even in the midst of that persecution and suffering, that God's going to use it, redeem it. And there's just this greater hope that we have. So yeah, I agree with you, Amy. I think for us to understand and have the perspective of, even if it's not happening at the same scale here in the US, we can rest and celebrate in the fact that it's exploding in other places, across the globe.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and start talking about chapter 1. And the first question of the book that she addresses is, aren't we better off without religion? And, I love the way she addresses the question, because she doesn't necessarily try to answer it specifically from Christianity. She's just saying, okay, hey, from a religious standpoint, we're stepping back from trying to defend the Bible and so on, but is the world better with religion or not? And you know what I thought was interesting, I think what this hits on, especially when she talks about on page 18 about the new atheist narratives of Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, is this idea that religion is actually dangerous. And so I'm just curious, what were y'all's thoughts on, this narrative that religion's actually bad for the world? Because I think that's what's really underneath that, is this idea that we're deceiving people. This is dangerous for people, and we need to protect them by waking them up from this God delusion, as Richard Dawkins would say. What are y'all's thoughts?
When I often hear from people who are atheists or agnostic or whatever it might be, they basically equate it to kind of like this fairy tale, and that, and I guess in their eyes, what they're weighing is that, this seems harmless and it's just a worldview, but at the same time, you've got people that are disillusioned, and anytime a general population is disillusioned, that it's dangerous, and I'm sure can play out in multiple different ways. But it's just amazing to be reminded of living in a fallen world, that there is just this, not kind of a passive, and we have some of that. You believe what you believe, I'm going to believe what I'm going to believe. But people who are adamantly in opposition to this will fight it, will devote their lives to try and bring down the narrative of the gospel or the Christian faith, and other faiths as well. So it's just a reminder that, the stakes for us as Christians living in this world, they're incredibly high. Because again, this isn't just against different opinions. This, at the end of the day, is a cosmic battle in between good and evil. And best believe that those on the other side are going to fight tooth and nail, so that they can evangelize, if you will, with their own message. And so, I don't know, it's an important reminder to be aware of what's on the line.
Good.
Yeah, I think, especially in this new atheism, if Satan had a choice, he would absolutely choose to scare people away from any type of religion. I think sometimes we forget that there's an enemy, and C.S. Lewis, and one of the things I love, I think it was Screwtape Letters. One of the ways Satan works is to confine Christianity to subculture, so that this Christian world would be so about itself that it would not affect the outside world, but also know Satan will work in a way to go, all right, well, if Christianity will spread, if the gospel spreads, then why don't I convince people there's something better than the gospel? So when he talks about the TED Talk, so instead of saying thank you, Jesus, they think they're heroes. Like, all right, thank you, Socrates, or thank you, Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Let's just replace Jesus with something else and convince people that, like you said, Hunter, early, religion's dangerous. Let's focus. It's not dangerous. Let's away from the gospel and let's get toward,
Right.
I don't know.
And it's ironic because they're making their own religion out of that. He mentioned, yeah, you're right. He mentioned like, let's thank and praise these other people, which is in some ways worship and therefore creating their own type of religion. But I love though, where she gets out in the chapter is essentially that like what psychology and science is actually showing us is that religion is a good thing for people. I think this is, I'm trying to find this quote where she says, to say that religion is bad for you, this is page 21, to say religion is bad for you is like saying drugs are bad for you without actually distinguishing cocaine from life-saving medicine. So, it's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's like to try and overgeneralize and say any belief in a supernatural God is bad, is overgeneralizing. But not only that, we're actually seeing that's not true at all. That religion is good for people, and she goes on to show us the data about how religion gives people hope and how that affects their mental health. But religion is also, this is page 22, religion fosters relationships. So, the fact that most religions teach that divorce is not a good thing, that we need to live in community and in deep relationship. We know that's true with Christianity. And so to see on how it promotes things that are actually for our good, which essentially as Christians, we can say, yeah, because God designed a certain way for the world to work and for our flourishing. And so, but psychology is kind of following up to show, oh, hey, this actually is true. Yeah. What about anything else in the chapter? I know she gets into 7 biblical principles, but I don't want to jump ahead unless you guys.
Well, I mean, it is amazing to me to think about how a lot of this adds up, and that because we were created by design to be in relationship with God and with one another, how there are implications, emotionally, spiritually, and even physically. You start to read some of the health statistics about, heart attacks, lower rates of depression, greater purpose in life, like all of these things. So this isn't like, being a Christian helps this one box of my life. This kind of helps me on the spiritual side. Now I got to figure out what's going on in these other boxes, and my social box and my emotional box. But really it's this beautiful and delicate balance that is brought together by God himself and by relationship with it. And so it's just a good reminder to know following Christ has every implication for every single area of your life, and even down to physiologically and how our bodies respond. That's crazy, and that's almost just like evidence that's just intrinsic within our design. Right. That's cool.
Right. Yeah.
I love that. Something that stood out to me when they talked about like it really is more blessed to give than receive, is it made me think back to a previous ministry that I worked for that talked a lot about generosity. And we actually had a program that helped teens learn about intentional generosity, because statistically speaking, if you can cultivate that in a teenager, they are more likely to have good grades and significantly less likely to have drug or alcohol abuse, to have risks of suicide. Like just and this is outside of a religious idea, just the idea of generosity overall creates this. Generosity with purpose is even more significant. And so, I mean, you see it happen for all ages. You don't have to be an adult who's working for this to be valuable to you. If we can cultivate this even in our younger people, that they will feel the health benefits, the spiritual benefits, and the emotional benefits for, years.
Yeah. I was shocked. She, one thing that I do love about this book is she cites her references a lot. She gives a lot of references for these big claims that she makes. Mm-hmm. And on that point of giving and generosity, she says, actively caring for others often yields greater physical and psychological benefits than being cared for. Mm-hmm. And I just thought how that is so crazy, that caring for someone else does a lot more for you, both physically and psychologically, than just having your own needs met. And she references, it looks like a psychological science journal from that statement. But it is crazy on how acts of service is good for us. It's actually doesn't just make us feel good, but it's also something that is for our good, and that's essentially what she does with all these principles. Is she goes into each of them, and these are biblical principles, but teaches on how ultimately all of these things are for our flourishing. And really, going back to this whole idea that religion is dangerous, what's ironic is on page 21, she points to the fact that secularization is what is dangerous. She says research suggests that those who regularly attend services are more optimistic and have lower rates of depression and so on. But if you turn this data on its head, the trend towards secularization is a public health crisis. Like, that's the ironic part, is how in the end, this secular mindset is the thing that's dangerous for us.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Especially these 7 biblical principles, either fully or partially, it's completely flipping everything on its head. Stuff that doesn't make sense. What, I'm gonna give my stuff away to other people? Love of money disappoints. That's completely antithetical to what the common narrative is in Scripture. Hey, do you make money, leverage relationships? Go. So all of these different things, you can be happy in all circumstances, right? Which we see Paul do, and when he's in prison. So and with our church kind of heading in this direction and just talking about the Sermon on the Mount, you just see these kingdom ethics, and they don't kind of jive in some ways and fit within, a culture at large standard. They're completely different and certainly radical, but that call to follow this radical lifestyle has just so many blessings that come along with it. So anyway.
What I love on those 7 foundations, she in this chapter is not trying to prove Christianity just yet. Right. And Hunter, you hit on this very early. She is basically proving, hey, we need religion. Religion is not a poison. So I love that she does not just mention Christian principles or whatnot, but I think it was something you just referenced, even happiness, the ability on page 27 to synthesize happiness is not limited to followers of Jesus. Buddhism devotes much attention to helping people maintain internal peace in the face of adversity. Jewish and Muslim practices also anchor to inner well-being, but there is a remarkable correspondence between psychological immune system Gilbert describes in the biblical call to contentment. And if you guys hear Pastor yelling, he's on lunch break playing ping pong, and Hunter and I are right outside the lobby. But I just loved that. As I read this chapter, I felt like I could hand this to a non-believing friend or a friend that is not of Christian faith and say, hey, read this with me. And they could read it and not go, oh, you're just trying to convince me of Christianity from chapter 1. But hey, you're proving that religion, at least here's the start. Now we could talk, we agree on religion. And then she'll get into in later chapters, Jesus. But
right. And you look at her footnotes, they're not scripture references.
That's right.
They're psychological journals and scientific studies and research, because she understands that that is those are the sources that have credibility to those people. And so she's saying, okay, let's put the Bible aside. I'll just use your people to show that they're saying that what the Bible says is true. Kind of like a Tim Keller approach.
That's right.
I love that, because so often I think, especially when I'm talking to a friend maybe who's atheist, they think that my faith is built on goosebumps and high emotions and a hope that doesn't make sense. Mm. And so I just love that, just the statistical evidence towards the benefit and how we're made for these kinds of things. Like Lane was talking about earlier, I think is great. And Wanda made a comment about how that work when it's a calling, that portion just really stood out to her. just the idea that even psychological research suggests we need meaningful work to thrive. You see somebody who's stuck in a job or in a place that's miserable, and it just wilts their entire person. And I love that idea of the calling. It made me think of 1 Thessalonians 4:11. That was Hunter going to get on to somebody. In 1 Thessalonians 4:11, it says, and aspire to live quietly, to mind your own affairs, to work with your hands as we instructed you. And just that whole idea of working with meaning and the value of that. I don't know.
Yeah. Like at the end of that section, she says, literally, you can be cleaning up vomit, and we can put our hearts into our work, connecting it with a larger purpose and gaining satisfaction. Like that's what religion can give us, is a greater purpose for doing these things, no matter what the task at hand is. And Lane, like you were saying, it seems so upside down and backwards. Like I love, she ends the chapter with Bob or Mary. These two pictures of Bob is the guy that everyone wants to be. And then Mary is, James just looked in here like, what's going on? And Mary is this picture of a person that we think, oh man, she didn't do anything with her life. Like she's wasted her life. But she was saying, based off of everything we've just said and all the research, it actually showed that she's happier than he is, because she's involved in church and she serves and she's in relationship and she has a happy marriage and all these kind of things. Whereas Bob is the one whose ideology will ultimately end him in loneliness and emptiness and constantly seeking after something it's not giving a deeper sense of worth and meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's so important. A lot of times I'll talk to people that, somewhere along the way, and I get it because there can be the temptation to do this, is, you get your identity and your value kind of found in what you do, how much money you make. The problem is that when those things become the measure of success or fruitfulness, it's never enough. So like what we think of right here and right now about, man, if I could just get there, as soon as you're there, you're realizing, holy cow, this measuring stick goes so much farther than I ever imagined. So it's back to what Paul's saying. I can be content essentially in all things, right? I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And that's it. It's like, that is such an important reminder, because if we don't, then other people become the benchmark. We live lives that are full of just envy and jealousness and just anxiety, because it's never enough, and it never will be enough outside of what Christ has done for us. And so, and then one other thing,
right.
Moody, I think you made a good point. I think it's important for Christians, especially Christians that maybe have been in the church their whole lives, to read books like this and to understand that when you engage and talk to other people, sometimes you're going to have to take a different approach to evangelism, because the Bible says is not necessarily going to hold weight with a non-believer. So, hey, let's look at this historically. Let's look at this, psychologically and like through societies and studies and all that. So it's good for us to know this as well, so that we can be even more equipped as we go out and engage just culture at large.
Yeah, well, in page 31, as she's saying that Christianity is well aligned with the findings of modern psychology. And she asked, does this alignment prove that Christianity is true? Certainly not. Rather, it should raise 100 questions in our minds, questions the chapters following will explore. And that's what it should do. The books like this should raise our questions so that we can, similar to like a Ravi Zacharias, we can prove through history, through intelligent conversation, why we believe what we believe, and not just, Jesus died for me. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means he died for me, And in the chapter, go for it, Hunter.
RZIM's motto of helping the thinker believe and the believer think. They mention at the end, I believe she's referencing a Harvard professor who believes that Christianity provides the best framework for understanding different aspects of reality. And he suggests that any educated person should, at some point, have critically examined the claims for Christianity and should be able to explain why he or she does not believe them. And I love that challenge she gives. Like, listen, have you actually really thought through these things? Not just dismiss them because you saw some memes on Facebook or whatever. Have you really asked yourself these questions? And to your point, Moody, I think believers need to really ask these hard questions, really consider them. Because ultimately, I mean, like we said, we believe that it will truly only build your faith. Okay, listen, for the sake of time, we're about to have to wrap up. I was going to look at the comments. Gina Smith said she loved this. That's so sweet.
Thank you, Gina.
Yes. Okay, Wanda, you shared that was the most provoking moment for you. Yeah, I agree that was a big thing. Kay Dodd said, can I still join the study? I can get the book on Kindle today. Absolutely, Kay. I'm about to tell you what we're going to read next week too, so you can join us. John said, I've only read the first chapter, but I question if her definition of Christianity in the church aligns with me. Great question. John, if you want to look up Rebecca McLaughlin, you can listen to some of her podcasts and stuff. She's written a lot for the Gospel Coalition. So I would say she's a really well-trusted Christian who holds to Orthodox Christianity. Her views, I think, would really align with ours as well theologically. There may be some small things, like I think she might be Anglican, but I'm not sure because she is British. But
Again,
yeah,
she's
so
not starting there. She's not really even clearly said her position yet, as much as just this first conversation.
Yeah. But if you want to do some digging on her as the author, check some of her stuff out. I can just say that the posse that she kind of hangs with theologically would align with our camp. So let's see. This was terrific. Thank you, Kay. Okay, and I think that's it. So guys, next week we're going to be reading chapter 2, which is Doesn't Christianity Crush Diversity? So read chapter 2, and we're going to do the same thing next week, same time. And so we hope to see you guys then. Thank you all for joining us.